Hey there everybody, welcome to the website. It's WayneD.com and I'm Wayne D. Today we're going to look at hip movement from the face-on view. And one of the things that I encourage all my students to try to do is to do what I call right loading. So when I talk about loading, and since you know that my website is called Pivot Compression, I like to see players load into the right side, and I like to see players turn what I would say is behind the ball. So the thing that I look for from face on is what happens in the two boxes that I draw, one on the head and one on the hips. And in particular, I want to see where the hips go in relation to the box, and I want to see where that head goes. So we'll talk about the downswing in a later video, but right now it's the backswing that I'm concerned with. So the wall, as I like to call it, is the line up against that right leg. And what I see in tons of really good players, and all the players I'm going to show you are major championship winners, what I see is loading against that wall and staying there right up until the moment of transition. As you can see, Hogan, that club is past parallel and he's still right up against the wall there. Also, you're going to see his upper body turn behind the ball as well, so he's going to create angle away from the ball in his spine, and you're going to see his head move off of its original position by a couple inches there. Now we can go up to 1952 and look at Hogan's swing again, and you're not going to see a whole lot different. Now obviously 52 after the accident, and a lot of people would claim that Hogan's swing changed quite a bit, but if we watch, let's take a look here. Essentially we see the same thing. We see right loading up against the wall, we see right movement of the head, we see the back angled away from the ball, away from the target, and again I would call that right loading and turning behind the ball. So let's take a look at a number of other major championship winners. Now here's Tom Kite. And I'm going to show you how he does it. He's going to do a great job also of staying in the box with the hips and up against that right hip. And he's going to load his upper body behind the ball to the right. Let's watch it. So I'm pretty sure if you had Tom on pressure plates here, you would find him just about 50-50 at address. And one of the things I like to do is I like to check the centeredness of the setup. The camera has to be directly in front of the golf ball here, and when I draw the lines up from the heels, that should indicate whether or not the body is aligned in the center. So Tom's hips are slightly pushed forward, his head is pretty much in the center, the ball's a little forward of center. So you might expect Tom's hips to move a little bit even more to the right than right up against the wall. And I would say in most cases I'll find players moving the hips to the right as opposed to loading into the center or the left, where you would find them twisting off of the wall in the backswing. So let's watch Tom. So once again, we see a movement behind the ball with the upper body, just a little less than half a hit, and once again, right up against the wall with that right hip. Now let's take a look at a couple of other excellent players here. Let's go with, how about Bernard Langer? So Bernard has one of the longest running successful careers ever, along with probably Snead and Nicklaus and Player, but Langer is still, amazingly enough, one of the greatest senior players, and he's 63 years old, which is amazing. So let's watch Bernard. Once again, you can see him. He's going to load right against the right side of that hip box. You can see his head move slightly to the right, and he's going to set himself up to drive off the right side over to the left. So again, as far as pressure goes, I would say that if you find these guys at 50-50 at address, by the time we get to the top of the swing, we're going to be close to 75-80 on the right side at the top. So these are things that I like. So here's another major winner. This is Stuart Sink. Let's take a look. We can see pretty obviously a really nicely centered setup. Now if you want to see somebody stay in the box, that's about as well as you're going to stay in the box. Right there as you're going to get. Very little head movement, but you'll still see just enough to angle the back behind the ball a little bit, and that sets him up to pressure himself back to the right and then back over to the left again. So maybe let's go back in time a little bit and look at the big three. Let's look at Arnie and Jack and Gary. All right, so here's Arnold Palmer. Let's take a look. And one of the differences back in the day was much bigger hip turn. But when you look at Palmer, even though that he turns his hips more as far as the amount of rotation, you can still see that he's up against that right wall, and that his head has definitely, again, loaded to the right. Now we move to an old shot of Jack. Let's take a look at Jack. So Jack was pretty famous for having a hugely deep hip turn. Where he would get his left heel up off the ground. But once again, there you go. Right load. Now, Jack was also famous for keeping his head still, but you can see if his head went anywhere, it went slightly to the right, stayed put as he started down. So here's Ernie Els. I took this picture of Ernie back at Hazeltine at the PGA 2000 and can't remember 2002, 3. So anyway, check him out. So there we see a little bump to the right. You can almost see a little bit of movement this way. And like I said, I'll see more guys do that than I will twist in toward the center or even to the left. And once again, right up on the wall, head moves a little right. You get a slight angle in the back. You're going to see less angle in the upper body with the iron than you will with the driver. Obviously, you're going to hit the up on the driver, so you're going to turn a little more behind it. Now, Jeff Sluman, who won the PGA Championship back in the 80s, was probably one of the smaller guys ever to be really successful on the tour. One of the great ball strikers, really, and one of the longest hitters for his weight you could imagine. So watch what Slu's going to do. He's going to really move to the right. So athletically, he's really loading to the right, which he probably had to do for the power that he needed to generate, since he really didn't have the mass, only coming in at about 130 pounds. So you can really see him extend. So that extension goes right along with right loading. So I haven't mentioned that yet, but the width of that backswing and the way that those arms are extending, notice how the right arm is fairly straight and the left arm very extended, so he's really stretching out and getting as much out of that backswing turn as he can. And that's pretty much the same thing that you can see if we go back to Hogan. You're going to see a prime example of extension in the arms. So for anybody that thought Hogan kept his right arm and his elbow tucked against him, these pictures are gonna tell you that that's not true. Even that's not even close to true. So Hogan got it very wide in the backswing. So here's another major winner, beautiful swinger, Steve Elkington. Let's take a look at Steve. So you know this is an oldie goldie because you can see the metal in that in that shaft there. So let's take a look. Once again. So the way I teach, I just keep looking at all these great players. I try to find commonalities and things that you don't see, poor players do. And I try to get the average guy to move toward that. So that's the idea. Let's load to the right. Turn behind the ball. Here's Nick Price hitting an iron shot. And again, with the iron, you're going to see the head move probably less, so the player can stay a little more on top of it. But once again, right there. And then if we do, let's take one more. Let's find Eduardo Molinari over here. Where'd you go? British Open champ. Great ball striker. Let's take a look. One more. And there you go. So I would really suggest to just about everybody, let's try to turn from a center position at address. Let's extend off the ball, stretch away, load against the right side of the box, allow the upper body, even encourage it to move off to the right, and then in the downswing we're going to stay behind it with the driver and hit up on it. And we'll go over that downswing move in the next video.